Hi, I'm Greg Sandow, and I'm sitting here now with Laura Brownell. And Laura, you are, let me see if I get this right, the Director Symphonic Services of the AFM, the American Federation of Musicians. And you're responsible for all of the union activity for all of North America in the symphonic field.
That is correct. Let me qualify that just by explaining a little bit about the structure of the AFM. The AFM is a federation of geographic locals. There are approximately 250 such locals in North America, including Canada and the United States. The symphonic bargaining rights are held by the locals, not by the federation, and that is dictated by labor law on both sides of the border. The Symphonic Services Division was created, I believe it was in the 70s. I'd have to check when that actually started. But that came out of a desire to provide an umbrella function to support the work of locals in representing their symphonic bargaining units.
So before we get into some of the details of what you do, I'm just curious to know, how long have you been doing this, and what led you to take a job like this?
I've been working for the AFM for almost 12 years now. 10 of those years were spent doing the symphonic function on the Canadian desk in Toronto. And it was a very similar function to the New York desk, except that because we were a department of 1.5 people, I pretty much learned how to do everything.
Were you the one or the half?
Oh, I was the one, and I had wonderful halves. I was able to, I had 3 different assistants that I all selected from the freelance field so that they were in touch with the actual work on the ground, and they could bring back to me what was happening, and I was able to avail myself of their expertise and knowledge, and they helped me out.
So New York is the center, and Canada was a branch.
That's correct. But now that I'm in New York, I have a staff of people who fulfill all of the functions that I used to fulfill. I believe we count 9 in total, including the Canadian staff. I have 2 full-time negotiators and 1 part-time that we use as needed. We have a full-time person who does contract administration, so that would be handling questions that come in about grievances or dismissals or interpretation. We have 1 full-time person who handles all the recording projects, and she is incredibly busy, often dealing with managers as well as musicians and local officers, helping them with the various projects that come through.
Okay, this is a lot to go over. I think probably I need grounding in all of that, but you started as an orchestral musician. You play the violin.
Yes.
How did you end up at the union?
Well, I joined the union.
You joined the union. No, of course you were a union member.
Absolutely.
You have to be.
When I was going to school at the University of Toronto, I, like so many young students, put myself through school playing in area orchestras in Flint, Michigan, and also in Toledo, Ohio. And in those days, and often in these days, you didn't sit down until you'd signed your card.
Right.
And so I joined and became a member early, but I didn't really get what I would call catching the bug until I began working professionally as a full-time musician in Hamilton, Ontario, as a violinist. And I was recruited early on by a man who went on to become the chair of the Organization of Canadian Symphony Musicians and is now a presenter in Europe. But he recruited me and brought me into the whole business of representing musicians early on.
I suppose I should say for the record here that although lately I've been a journalist and consultant and composer, I was a member of Local 802 in New York as a conductor in the 70s, as I was hired to conduct performances of a small opera company, and I insisted that they be union.
Well, that's great.
Because otherwise the musicians would be underpaid and exploited.
Well, you just mentioned 2 very important words, underpaid and exploited. I think it's important to understand where the symphonic musicians came from. Back, I would say, pre-1960s even the very finest symphonic musicians in North America were supplementing their rather small incomes by driving cabs in the summer. They had hot dog stands. They had many, many students. They would have to find other ways.
I have seen such wonderful evidence of that. The Indianapolis Symphony did a nice little book to celebrate some anniversary of theirs. And as part of the orchestra's history, they recounted the jobs that people had. And they were working in factories, and they were clerks in stores.
Exactly right. And I think that one of the wonderful things that has come from the unionization of that group of musicians and essentially creating good, full-time, secure jobs for these people is that more and more people have been able to make that choice as a career choice. One of the goals of my department and of the AFM is to ensure that symphonic performance continues to be a viable career choice for these people.
Absolutely, because you're talking about people who are highly trained professionals who in the old days did not make anything like the income that comparable professionals in other fields would make, and also served at the whim of the conductor.
That's exactly right. And these days, many people would opt out of the profession altogether if we did not provide the job security that we try to provide in doing that.
An important overview, and then one that comes up for scrutiny again in these troubled times as people are asking musicians to take cutbacks in salary, and some orchestras have abandoned the 52-week contract. It's a difficult time.
It is a difficult time, and I think that it is a wonderful opportunity for us all to pause and take a good hard look at where we've come, and maybe the pendulum swung a little bit the other way to a point, and I think it's very possible that we're coming back to the middle. May I explain what I mean by that a little bit?
Yes.
I can even put it in terms of my own experience on the Canadian desk. When I first started working there, the musicians did not have any history of militancy at all. The Canadian musicians, they had become quite separated from their American counterparts, and there had been some really tough times with the government funding, and of course the Canadian orchestras are more dependent on that government funding. And there had been years and years of rollbacks and cutbacks and really hard times for musicians. Once they started interacting with their U.S. counterparts and understanding where they had fallen in the ranks as far as their compensation and their quality of working life, there was a history of really severe and bitter job actions. We had strikes, we had lockouts, we had, people out for 11 weeks and 12 weeks, and there were some big settlements as a result of that. One thing that I have learned, and this swings both ways, is that a settlement achieved through sheer economic force that does not have true buy-in from both parties is a settlement that is not likely to stick.
Right. You're talking about a settlement where one party essentially brings the other to its knees economically. The management, for example, realizes that the orchestra simply won't function anymore unless they give in to what the musicians want. Or the musicians feel that they're just beaten and they have to give in to what management wants.
And both of those things can happen.
Right.
And neither of those things are healthy.
Right.
It doesn't mean that strikes will never happen. They will sometimes have to happen, but I think generally speaking they're a poor way to resolve a dispute, and we all need to put down our bricks and bats and come to a better way of understanding how to deal with each other. So you and I